Louis Spohr was an important Romantic violinist and composer, sometimes called the German Paganini. He was also a conductor and was highly regarded during his lifetime. He composed 10 symphonies, 10 operas, 18 violin concerti, 4 clarinet concerti, 4 oratorios, and various works for small ensemble, chamber music, and art songs. Spohr was also innovative. Indeed, he invented the violin chin rest and the orchestral rehearsal mark. His output occupies a pivotal position between classicism and romanticism. However, he fell into obscurity following his death, when much of his music was rarely heard. Spohr's operas Faust from 1816, Semira und Azor from 1819, and Gesonder from 1823 did remain in the popular repertoire throughout the 19th and well into the 20th century, although Gesonder became controversial during the Third Reich. The late 20th century saw a modest revival of interest in his oeuvre, primarily in Europe, but his reputation has never been restored to what it was during his lifetime. That being said, though, to violinists, he is very important. During his lifetime, Louis Spohr was accepted as one of the most important composers of early German Romanticism, whose compositions covered all the major genres of that era. Louis Spohr was born on the 5th of April 1784 and died on the 22nd of October 1859. He was therefore 75 years of age when he died, which is not bad for the time. He was baptized Ludwig Spohr and was born in Braunschweig in the Duchy of Brunswick-Wolfenbüttel to Karl Heinrich Spohr and Juliana Ernestine Louise Henke. In 1786, when Spohr was around 2, the family moved to Gießen. Spohr's first musical encouragement came from his parents. His mother was a gifted singer and pianist, and his father played the flute. Spohr was born into a cultured upper-middle-class family. His father, Karl Heinrich Spohr, was a medical doctor and medical counsellor, and his mother, Ernestine Henke, was the daughter of a clergyman. Spohr showed early aptitude for music, and at the age of 4 he was already singing duets with his mother at musical gatherings. His father bought him a violin at an early age, and he took his first lessons with the local teacher Riemenschneider. Spohr progressed rapidly and was soon playing trios by Kalkbrenner at family musical gatherings. In 1791, a French emigrant by the name of Dufour settled in the area where Spohr lived, and although Dufour was an amateur, he was an accomplished violinist and cello player. Spohr writes, "I gave my parents no rest until I had lessons from him." And so Dufour gave Spohr some early violin teaching, and Dufour recognized the boy's musical talent and persuaded his parents to send him to Brunswick for further instruction. Spohr's father had always wanted Louis to study medicine, but soon agreed to his son's musical career. During his time of study with Dufour, Spohr had already tried his hands at composition as well, and his first attempts at composition date from the early 1790s. Spohr wrote, "I've not yet had instruction in harmony, but I wrote duets for 2 violins and I executed them with my teacher at our musical soirees, astonishing my parents with them in the highest degree. To this day I recollect the proud feeling of already being able to appear before the friends of the house as a composer. The duets, which my father has carefully preserved, are indeed incorrect and childish, but possess a certain form and a flowing melody." Having shown considerable talent in composition, Spohr was sent to the city of Brunswick, therefore, to receive advanced lessons on the violin and in music theory. He writes, "I received instruction on the violin from Kammermusikus König, a well-grounded and amiable teacher, to whom I owe much. Less friendly was my instructor in harmony and counterpoint, an old organist named Hartung. He corrected me so mercilessly and scratched out so many ideas which to me appeared sublime. Spohr soon started to work through theoretical treatises on his own, and he quickly appeared publicly in Brunswick with a composition for the violin. Following his successful public appearances, Spohr began to take lessons with concert master Muckur, the best violinist of the Brunswick Orchestra. With Muckur's instruction, he says, I progressed more and more toward becoming an excellent solo player. And after about a year, he considered me to have made progress enough to enable me to try my luck in the world as a travelling artiste. However, Spohr was in for a fairly rude awakening. Once he arrived in the city of Hamburg, he was told in no uncertain terms that it would be impossible to arrange a concert during the summer. As all the rich people were on holiday, his hopes dashed and out of money, Spohr walked back all the way to Brunswick. The failure of his first concert tour, a badly planned venture to Hamburg in 1799, caused him to ask Duke Karl Wilhelm Ferdinand of Brunswick for financial help. And so Spohr decided to ask the Duke of Brunswick for a scholarship to continue his studies. Spohr was invited to the palace the next day, and the stage was set for his participation in a court concert, which took place once a week. Spohr writes, I played with real inspiration and must have surpassed the expectations of the Duke, for he, even while I was playing, cried repeatedly, bravo. After I'd finished, he came to me, patted me on the shoulder and said, the talent is there. I will take care of you. Come to me tomorrow. The very next day, 15-year-old Spohr was engaged as a chamber musician. This successful concert at the court had impressed the Duke so much that he decided to engage the 15-year-old Spohr as a chamber musician. In 1802, through the good offices of the Duke, he became the pupil of Franz Eck and accompanied him on a concert tour which took him as far as St. Petersburg in Russia. In Brunswick, he became a teenage member of the court orchestra. Eck completely retrained Spohr in violin technique. Eck himself was a product of the Mannheim school, and Spohr became its most prominent heir. Spohr's first notable compositions, including his Violin Concerto No. 1, date from this time. After his return home, the Duke granted him leave to make a concert tour of North Germany. A concert in Leipzig in December 1804 brought the influential music critic Friedrich Rochlitz to his knees, quote, not only because of Spohr's playing, but also because of his compositions. And Spohr developed into the leading German violinist of his day after achieving overnight fame with this Leipzig concert. The concert brought the young man overnight fame in the whole German-speaking world. In 1805, Spohr obtained a position as concertmaster at the court of Gotha, where he stayed until 1812. There he met the 18-year-old harpist and pianist Doretta Scheidler, daughter of one of the court singers. They were married on the 2nd of February 1806 and lived happily until Doretta's death 28 years later. Spohr was around 21 when he got married. They performed successfully together as a violin and harp duo, Spohr having composed the sonata in C minor for violin and harp for her. And they toured in Italy between 1816 and 1817, in England in 1820 and Paris in 1821. Doretta later abandoned her harpist's career to concentrate on raising the couple's children. In 1808, Spohr practiced with Beethoven at the latter's home, working on the piano trio Opus 70 No. 1, The Ghost. Spohr wrote that the piano was out of tune and that Beethoven's playing was harsh or careless. In 1812, Spohr conducted a concert in the Predigerkirche of the French-occupied Principality of Erfurt to celebrate Napoleon's 43rd birthday. Spohr later worked as conductor at the Theater an der Wien, Vienna, between 1813 and 1815, where he continued to be on friendly terms with Beethoven. Subsequently, he was opera director at Frankfurt, between 1817 and 1819, where he was able to stage his own operas, the first of which, Faust, had been rejected in Vienna. Spohr's longest period of employment, from 1822 until his death, was as the director of music at the recently succeeded William II Elector of Hesse's court of Kassel, a position offered him on the suggestion of Karl Maria von Weber. Spohr's wife Doretta died in 1834 at the age of 47, which brought great sorrow to Spohr. In Kassel, on the 3rd of January 1836, he married his second wife, the 29-year-old Marianne Pfeiffer, daughter of the jurist Burkhard Wilhelm Pfeiffer. Spohr was around 51 at the time, and his second wife was 29. She survived him by many years, living until 1892. In 1851, the Elector refused to sign the permit for Spohr's 2 months' leave of absence, to which he was entitled under his contract, and when the musician departed without the permit, a portion of his salary was deducted. In 1857, he was pensioned off, much against his own wish, and in the winter of the same year he broke his arm, an accident which put an end to his violin playing. Nevertheless, he conducted his opera Gisonda at the 50th anniversary of the Prague Conservatorium in the following year. As a conductor, he had much to do with establishing the regular use of the baton, giving pioneering performances of Bach's St. Matthew's Passion, Beethoven's Ninth Symphony and Missa Solemnis, Schumann's Spring Symphony and Wagner's Flying Dutchman and Tannhäuser. He invented the rehearsal letters used for orchestral rehearsal. Like Haydn, Mozart and his own slightly older contemporary Hummel, Louis Spohr was an active Freemason. He was also active as a renowned violin instructor and had about 200 pupils throughout his career, many of these becoming famous themselves. He trained 200 violinists, but also conductors and composers. His notable pupils included violinists Henry Blagrove and Henry Holmes. From 1822 onwards, young violinists from all over Europe made a pilgrimage to his Kassel workshop to learn at the famous Spohr Violin School. Spohr was a noted violinist and invented the violin chin rest around 1820. He was also a significant conductor, being one of the first to use the baton and inventing rehearsal letters. These rehearsal letters are placed periodically throughout a piece of sheet music so that a conductor may save time by asking the orchestra or singers to start playing from letter C, for example. Spohr throughout his life held major directorships in Gotha from 1805 to 12, Vienna 1813 to 15, Frankfurt from 1817 to 19, and finally Kassel 1822 to 1857. In Kassel is where he died on the 22nd of October 1859. Spohr also found time for numerous concert tours, including St. Petersburg, Italy, England 6 times, and Paris. In 1859, he died at Kassel on the 22nd of October. As a composer, Spohr produced more than 150 works with opus numbers, in addition to a number of nearly 140 works without such numbers. He wrote music in all genres. His 9 symphonies, a 10th was completed but withdrawn, show progress from the classical style of his predecessors to program music. His 6th symphony represents successive styles from Bach, Handel to the moderns. His 7th symphony represents the sacred and secular in human life with a double orchestra, and his 9th symphony represents Die Jahreszeiten, or the seasons. Between 1803 and 1844, Spohr wrote more violin concertos than any other composer of the time, 18 in all, including works left unpublished at his death. And he also composed 2 double violin concertos and 4 clarinet concertos, all written for the virtuoso Johann Simon Helmstedt, which have established a secure place in clarinetists' repertoire. For us violinists, the Concerto No. 8 is the special one, especially for those of us that are Jascha Heifetz fans. Some of Spohr's concertos are formally unconventional, and this is one example of that. It's a one-movement concerto which is in the style of an operatic aria, and which is still periodically revived. Jascha Heifetz championed it. I've made a video on his version compared with others, and there's also a fine 2006 recording by Hilary Hahn and some other great versions, including Pierre Amoyal, who was Heifetz's student. Heifetz's legendary recording of Spohr's Violin Concerto No. 8 in A minor, Opus 47, Gesangsszene, was recorded in 1956. To me, it is the definitive version and will never be surpassed. It was released on the RCA Red Seal label as part of an LP that also featured the Miklos Rosa Violin Concerto, and it is widely recognised as a cornerstone romantic interpretation from that era. The orchestra was the RCA Victor Symphony Orchestra, conducted by Isla Solomon. In addition to musical works, Spohr is remembered particularly for his Violin Schule, the Violin School, a treatise on violin playing which codified many of the latest advances in violin technique, such as the use of spiccato. It became a standard work of instruction. In addition, he wrote an entertaining and informative autobiography, published posthumously in 1860. A museum is devoted to his memory in Kassel. According to Ray M. Longier, Spohr's best works were hailed by many of his contemporaries as quintessentially romantic and inherited by Mendelssohn. Among Spohr's chamber music is a series of no fewer than 36 string quartets, as well as 4 double quartets for 2 string quartets. He also wrote an assortment of other quartets, duos, trios, quintets, sextets, an octet and a nonet, as well as works for solo violin and for solo harp, and works for violin and harp to be played by him and his wife together. His opera Gisonde was banned by the Nazis because it depicted a European hero in love with an Indian princess. Spohr also wrote 105 songs and duets, many of them collected as Deutsche Lieder, German songs, as well as a mass and other choral works. Most of his operas were little known outside of Germany, but his oratorios, particularly Die letzten Dinge from 1825-1826, were greatly admired during the 19th century in England and America. This oratorio was translated by Edward Taylor and performed as the Last Judgment in 1830 for the first time. During the Victorian era, Gilbert and Sullivan mentioned Spohr in Act 2 of The Mikado in a song by the title character. Spohr, with his 18 violin concertos, won a conspicuous place in the musical literature of the 19th century. He endeavoured, without any good result, to make the concerto a substantial and superior composition, free from the artificial bravura of the time. He achieved a new romantic mode of expression. Those that would criticise Spohr would cite the weaker sides of his violin compositions, observed in his somewhat monotonous rhythmic structures, in his rejection of certain piquant bowing styles and artificial harmonics, and in the deficiency of contrapuntal textures. For much of the 20th century, scarcely any of Spohr's numerous compositions were performed or recorded, and musicologists showed little interest. The predominant view was expressed by Gerald Abraham in 1938 when he stated bluntly, "Spohr's music is dead." Yet, traces of Spohr's former status remained. His name decorated the cover of the Novello Oratorio vocal scores alongside Bach, Handel, Haydn, Mozart, Weber and Mendelssohn, until he was replaced by Elgar around 1930. Perhaps one would have forgotten Spohr's music had it not been for the continuous care of violinists who, if not so often publicly, still play his music. Still, Spohr merited a 7-page article in the 5th edition of Grove's Dictionary of Music and Musicians in 1954, which was only slightly abbreviated from the 1st edition of 1879. In the 1st edition he was called a great violinist and famous composer, whereas in the 3rd he was called a great violinist and composer, and in the 5th, German violinist and composer. So the greatness began to be dropped from subsequent editions of Grove's dictionary. Rivalry between Louis Spohr, born 1784 and died 1859, and Niccolo Paganini, 1782 and 1840. Arguably, Paganini was the better violinist. This was not a hostile feud as such, but rather a profound clash of artistic philosophies representing two opposing schools of 19th century violin playing. These are two great 19th century players, of course. While Spohr viewed technique as a means to an end, focusing on tone, lyrical melody and classical structure, Paganini was viewed as the ultimate showman, pushing the limits of technical acrobatics. Spohr was the German Paganini, though, a true devil's violinist, but at the same time a dignified composer. He lived through the rise, success and death of important composers like Ludwig van Beethoven, Franz Schubert, Felix Mendelssohn, Robert Schumann. He was a contemporary witness of classicism and romanticism, a composer of more than 300 works. One person drew a comparison between his music and a river. Of his music he wrote, "It flows in eternal peace and smoothness between even, flat banks. Through flowering meadows and fertile fields, it never foams against cliffs on its shores, it never surges against picturesque rocks." Spohr's music, especially his violin music, including 18 concertos, belongs to a unique musical in-between generation who knew Beethoven and observed the emerging romanticism, but were neither interested in the brooding Sturm und Drang nor in romantic escapism. Instead, Spohr used a mediating lyrical poetic musical language. In the press of the time, he was once described as a poet of the instrumental movement. Spohr achieved a personal style and found his own niche in music history. His music has been described as timeless. Listen to his Violin Concerto No. 8 in the hands of Jascha Heifetz and think about that sentence. His music is timeless. He was one of the greatest violinists of his generation and a prolific composer. The University of Music Franz Liszt Weimar specifically chose Louis Spohr as the artistic, pedagogical leading figure of their international violin competition. In conclusion, let's take a look at some of Louis Spohr's fine violins.